In the unforgiving mountains of eastern Afghanistan, where death stalks every ridge and valley, Staff Sergeant Elena Pierce never imagined that a single bullet would transform her from an overlooked communications specialist into a legend whispered about in ranger battalions across the globe. What began as a routine reconnaissance mission would end with 8 Taliban fighters dead and 12 American Rangers alive, all because one woman refused to let her brothers in arms die on her watch. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The Afghan sun hadn't yet crested the jagged peaks of the Hindu Kush when Staff Sergeant Elena Pierce finished her final equipment check at Forward Operating Base Viper. At 26, she possessed the kind of quiet competence that came from 5 years of military service, 3 deployments, and an unwavering dedication to keeping her fellow soldiers connected and alive through her mastery of battlefield communications. Her auburn hair was pulled back in regulation style beneath her Kevlar helmet, and her pale green eyes held the focused intensity of someone who understood that in Afghanistan, attention to detail meant the difference between coming home and coming home in a flag-draped coffin. Elena carried herself with the purposeful stride of a soldier who had earned respect through performance rather than politics, though few outside her immediate unit truly understood the depth of her capabilities. Growing up on a cattle ranch in western Montana, Elena had learned to shoot before she could properly ride a bicycle. Her father, a Vietnam veteran named Thomas Pierce, had insisted that all his children understand firearms safety and marksmanship, but Elena had shown a natural aptitude that bordered on the supernatural. By age 14, she could consistently hit targets at 800 yards with her father's hunting rifle, and by 18, she had won every shooting competition within a 3-state radius. The Army had been her ticket away from the isolation of ranch life and towards something greater than herself. She had enlisted with dreams of becoming a sniper, drawn by the precision and responsibility that the role demanded. However, military bureaucracy and outdated attitudes about women in combat roles had channeled her into communications instead, where her technical aptitude and steady demeanor made her invaluable as a radio operator and battlefield coordinator. Elena had never complained about the assignment, understanding that every role in the military served a crucial purpose. She threw herself into mastering communications equipment, encryption protocols, and coordination procedures with the same intensity she had once applied to perfecting her marksmanship. Her ability to maintain calm under pressure and relay critical information accurately had saved lives on multiple occasions, earning her commendations and the deep respect of the Rangers she supported. But on this particular morning, as she prepared for what intelligence reports suggested would be a routine reconnaissance patrol in the Korengal Valley, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that something was different. The briefing had been more tense than usual, with whispered conversations between officers and frequent references to increased Taliban activity in the region. The mission parameters seemed straightforward enough: establish an observation post overlooking a suspected enemy supply route and monitor activity for 48 hours. Captain Michael Rodriguez, the patrol leader, was a seasoned ranger with 4 deployments and a reputation for bringing his soldiers home alive. His weathered face bore the lines that came from years of making life-and-death decisions in hostile territory, and his dark eyes held the kind of intensity that inspired confidence in his men. He had specifically requested Elena for this mission, knowing that reliable communications would be essential for coordinating with headquarters and calling in support if needed. The patrol consisted of 12 Rangers, each handpicked for their specific skills and experience. Sergeant First Class David Murphy, the team's designated marksman, carried an M110 semi-automatic sniper system and had 43 confirmed kills to his credit. Corporal James Wilson specialized in demolitions and possessed an encyclopedic knowledge of improvised explosive devices. Private First Class Sarah Chen served as the team medic, her small frame belying the strength and courage that had earned her the respect of hardened combat veterans. As the patrol gathered in the pre-dawn darkness for final instructions, Elena noticed the subtle tension that preceded dangerous missions. Veterans checked and rechecked their equipment, while newer soldiers fought to control their nerves. The weight of responsibility settled over the group like a familiar burden, each soldier understanding that their survival depended not just on their individual skills but on their ability to function as a cohesive unit. Captain Rodriguez spread a topographical map across a wooden table, his finger tracing the route they would take through the treacherous mountain terrain. The observation post would be established on a ridge overlooking the Korangal Valley, a location that provided excellent visibility of the suspected supply route while offering multiple escape routes if the position became compromised. Intelligence suggested that Taliban fighters had been using the valley to move weapons and supplies under cover of darkness, and command wanted confirmation of their activities. Elena studied the map carefully, memorizing key terrain features and identifying potential communication dead zones where the mountainous terrain might interfere with radio signals. She made mental notes about relay positions and backup communication protocols, understanding that if the patrol encountered trouble, her ability to coordinate with headquarters could mean the difference between extraction and annihilation. The mission briefing concluded with weather reports predicting clear skies and moderate temperatures, conditions that would provide excellent visibility but also make the patrol more vulnerable to enemy observation. Intelligence assessments suggested minimal enemy presence in the immediate area, though recent Taliban activity in neighboring valleys had everyone on edge. The patrol would move out in 30 minutes, using the cover of pre-dawn darkness to reach their objective before sunrise. As the briefing ended and soldiers dispersed to collect their gear, Elena made her way to the communications bunker for a final check of her equipment. Her radio system was her lifeline to the outside world, and she methodically tested each frequency and backup channel to ensure everything functioned perfectly. The weight of the radio pack settled familiarly across her shoulders, along with her M4 carbine and the standard load of ammunition and equipment that each soldier carried. Walking toward the departure point, Elena's thoughts drifted to a conversation she'd had with her father during her last leave. Thomas Pierce had asked her about her experiences in Afghanistan, and she had found herself describing the satisfaction she felt when her communications expertise helped save lives or complete missions successfully. Her father had nodded approvingly, but then surprised her with an observation that had stayed with her ever since. "Elena," he had said in his gravelly voice, weathered by years of Montana winters, "I'm proud of what you've accomplished, but I hope you remember that all those hours we spent on the rifle range weren't just about hunting or competition. Sometimes life puts you in situations where all your different skills come together in ways you never expected. When that happens, you trust your training and do what needs to be done." Those words echoed in her mind as the patrol moved out into the darkness, 12 Rangers beginning what they believed would be a routine reconnaissance mission. None of them could have imagined that within 18 hours, Elena Pierce would face a situation that would test every skill she had ever learned and force her to make decisions that would haunt and inspire her for the rest of her life. The mountain air was crisp and thin as the patrol began their ascent into terrain that had claimed the lives of countless soldiers throughout Afghanistan's long history of conflict. Elena adjusted her pack and checked her weapon one final time, unaware that she was walking toward a confrontation that would transform her from a communications specialist into a legend whispered about in military circles around. The patrol moved through the Afghan wilderness like ghosts, their night vision goggles transforming the treacherous mountain terrain into an alien landscape of green shadows and stark contrasts. Elena maintained her position in the middle of the formation, her communications equipment humming quietly as she monitored multiple radio frequencies for any sign of enemy activity or updates from headquarters. The ascent proved more challenging than the briefing had suggested. What appeared on maps as manageable slopes revealed themselves as near vertical climbs over loose shale and crumbling rock faces that threatened to send entire sections of the mountain cascading into the valleys below. Each step required careful consideration, and the patrol's progress slowed to a methodical crawl as they navigated around obstacles that could have spelled disaster for a less experienced unit. Sergeant First Class Murphy moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his sniper rifle secured across his back while he used his hands to test each handhold before committing his weight. Behind him, Corporal Wilson carried demolitions equipment that could level a building, yet he moved with surprising delicacy to avoid disturbing the precarious rock formations. The entire patrol understood that in this terrain, a single misstep could trigger an avalanche that would bury them all, or alert every Taliban fighter within 10 miles to their presence. As they climbed higher into the mountains, Elena began to appreciate the tactical challenges their mission would present. The communications equipment that made her invaluable also made her vulnerable. The radio pack on her back represented a beacon that enemy fighters could track if they possessed the right equipment, and the antennas necessary for long-range communication were visible to anyone with decent optics and the patience to watch for them. 3 hours into their movement, Captain Rodriguez called a halt in a cluster of boulders that provided concealment from both air and ground observation. The patrol used the break to hydrate, check equipment, and adjust their route based on reconnaissance observations. Elena took the opportunity to establish contact with headquarters, confirming their position and receiving updates on intelligence reports from other units operating in the region. The news from headquarters was troubling. 2 other patrols operating in adjacent valleys had reported increased Taliban radio chatter, suggesting coordinated movement of enemy forces throughout the region. More concerning was a report from a reconnaissance drone that had observed what appeared to be heavy weapons being transported along mountain trails just 20 kilometers from their planned observation post. The mission parameters remained unchanged, but everyone understood that the situation was more volatile than initial intelligence had suggested. During the break, Elena found herself studying the faces of her fellow rangers. Each man carried the weight of experience differently. Some, like Captain Rodriguez and Sergeant Murphy, displayed the calm confidence that came from surviving multiple deployments and countless firefights. Others, particularly the younger soldiers, showed subtle signs of nervousness that they tried to mask through busy work and forced conversations. Private First Class Chen, despite her medical training and combat experience, seemed particularly tense. Elena had worked with the medic on previous missions and recognized the signs of someone processing worst-case scenarios and mentally rehearsing the procedures she might need to implement if the patrol encountered serious trouble. The weight of responsibility for keeping 12 Rangers alive in hostile territory was something that never became routine, no matter how many missions someone completed. As the patrol resumed movement, the terrain began to level out slightly, allowing them to increase their pace while maintaining security protocols. Elena monitored her radio equipment continuously, noting how the mountainous terrain created communication shadows that could isolate them from headquarters for extended periods. She made mental adjustments to her communication plan, identifying relay positions and backup frequencies that might maintain connectivity if their primary systems failed. Preparing and narrating the story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The sun began to rise as they approached their objective area, painting the Afghan landscape in harsh reds and golds that revealed both its terrible beauty and its inherent dangers. The mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, their peaks disappearing into morning haze that could conceal enemy positions or friendly forces with equal effectiveness. Elena understood why Afghanistan had been called the graveyard of empires. This was terrain that favored defenders and punished anyone foolish enough to underestimate its challenges. Captain Rodriguez used hand signals to communicate as they moved into the final approach to their observation post. Sound carried unpredictably in the mountains, and voices that seemed whisper quiet to the speaker could echo across valleys to reveal positions to enemy listeners. The patrol's movement became even more deliberate as they navigated the last kilometer to their destination, each soldier acutely aware that they were entering the most dangerous phase of their mission. The observation post itself occupied a narrow ridge that provided excellent visibility across the Korangal Valley while offering multiple concealed positions for the patrol to establish their equipment. Elena immediately began identifying the best locations for her communication gear, looking for positions that would maximize signal strength while minimizing the visual signature that could betray their presence to enemy observers. As the Rangers established their positions, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sensation wasn't uncommon in Afghanistan, where the local population's loyalties were often unclear and Taliban fighters could blend seamlessly into the civilian landscape. However, something about this morning felt different, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of violence. Her equipment indicated strong signal strength with headquarters, and Elena established contact to confirm their arrival at the objective. The response from base was routine, but she noticed subtle tension in the radio operator's voice that suggested developments were occurring beyond what she could observe from her mountain perch. She made a mental note to monitor headquarters frequency more closely for any changes in operational tempo that might affect their mission. Sergeant Murphy had established his sniper position in a cluster of rocks that provided excellent concealment while offering clear fields of fire across multiple approaches to their location. His movements were economical and precise as he prepared his rifle and began the methodical process of ranging potential targets throughout the valley below. Elena watched him work with professional admiration, recognizing the dedication and skill required to achieve his level of marksmanship expertise. The morning progressed with routine observation activities as the patrol monitored the suspected supply route for any sign of Taliban movement. Elena maintained communication with headquarters while conducting her own surveillance of radio frequencies used by enemy forces. The electronic warfare aspect of modern combat was invisible to casual observers, but Elena understood that the radio spectrum was as much a battlefield as the physical terrain around them. By midday, the patrol had observed several civilian vehicles moving through the valley, but nothing that matched the profile of military supply convoys. The heat was becoming oppressive, and Elena could feel sweat accumulating beneath her body armor despite the relatively cool mountain air. Afghanistan's climate was unforgiving, capable of producing hypothermia and heatstroke within the same 24-hour period, depending on elevation and weather conditions. As afternoon approached, Elena began preparing for what she hoped would be an uneventful night of continued observation. Her communications schedule with headquarters called for regular check-ins every 4 hours, with emergency frequencies monitored continuously for any sign of trouble from other units or changes in the tactical situation. She had no way of knowing that within 6 hours, every skill she had ever learned would be tested in ways she had never imagined possible. The mountains around them seemed peaceful in the afternoon light, but Elena's instincts told her that appearances in Afghanistan were often deceiving. Something was building in the electronic chatter she monitored, a subtle increase in coded transmissions that suggested coordinated movement somewhere in the region. She made detailed notes of her observations, unaware that she was documenting the preliminary stages of an ambush that would transform her from a communications specialist into a legend. The patrol moved through the Afghan wilderness like ghosts, their night vision goggles transforming the treacherous mountain terrain into an alien landscape of green shadows and stark contrasts. Elena maintained her position in the middle of the formation, her communications equipment humming quietly as she monitored multiple radio frequencies for any sign of enemy activity or updates from headquarters. The ascent proved more challenging than the briefing had suggested. What appeared on maps as manageable slopes revealed themselves as near-vertical climbs over loose shale and crumbling rock faces that threatened to send entire sections of the mountain cascading into the valleys below. Each step required careful consideration, and the patrol's progress slowed to a methodical crawl as they navigated around obstacles that could have spelled disaster for a less experienced unit. Sergeant First Class Murphy moved with the fluid grace of a predator, his sniper rifle secured across his back while he used his hands to test each handhold before committing his weight. Behind him, Corporal Wilson carried demolitions equipment that could level a building, yet he moved with surprising delicacy to avoid disturbing the precarious rock formations. The entire patrol understood that in this terrain, a single misstep could trigger an avalanche that would bury them all, or alert every Taliban fighter within 10 miles to their presence. As they climbed higher into the mountains, Elena began to appreciate the tactical challenges their mission would present. The communications equipment that made her invaluable also made her vulnerable. The radio pack on her back represented a beacon that enemy fighters could track if they possessed the right equipment, and the antennas necessary for long-range communication were visible to anyone with decent optics and the patience to watch for them. 3 hours into their movement, Captain Rodriguez called a halt in a cluster of boulders that provided concealment from both air and ground observation. The patrol used the break to hydrate, check equipment, and adjust their route based on reconnaissance observations. Elena took the opportunity to establish contact with headquarters, confirming their position and receiving updates on intelligence reports from other units operating in the region. The news from headquarters was troubling. 2 other patrols operating in adjacent valleys had reported increased Taliban radio chatter, suggesting coordinated movement of enemy forces throughout the region. More concerning was a report from a reconnaissance drone that had observed what appeared to be heavy weapons being transported along mountain trails just 20 kilometers from their planned observation post. The mission parameters remained unchanged, but everyone understood that the situation was more volatile than initial intelligence had suggested. During the break, Elena found herself studying the faces of her fellow rangers. Each man carried the weight of experience differently. Some, like Captain Rodriguez and Sergeant Murphy, displayed the calm confidence that came from surviving multiple deployments and countless firefights. Others, particularly the younger soldiers, showed subtle signs of nervousness that they tried to mask through busy work and forced conversations. Private First Class Chen, despite her medical training and combat experience, seemed particularly tense. Elena had worked with the medic on previous missions and recognized the signs of someone processing worst-case scenarios and mentally rehearsing the procedures she might need to implement if the patrol encountered serious trouble. The weight of responsibility for keeping 12 Rangers alive in hostile territory was something that never became routine, no matter how many missions someone completed. As the patrol resumed movement, the terrain began to level out slightly, allowing them to increase their pace while maintaining security protocols. Elena monitored her radio equipment continuously, noting how the mountainous terrain created communication shadows that could isolate them from headquarters for extended periods. She made mental adjustments to her communication plan, identifying relay positions and backup frequencies that might maintain connectivity if their primary systems failed. The sun began to rise as they approached their objective area, painting the Afghan landscape in harsh reds and golds that revealed both its terrible beauty and its inherent dangers. The mountains stretched endlessly in every direction, their peaks disappearing into morning haze that could conceal enemy positions or friendly forces with equal effectiveness. Elena understood why Afghanistan had been called the graveyard of empires. This was terrain that favored defenders and punished anyone foolish enough to underestimate its challenges. Captain Rodriguez used hand signals to communicate as they moved into the final approach to their observation post. Sound carried unpredictably in the mountains, and voices that seemed whisper quiet to the speaker could echo across valleys to reveal positions to enemy listeners. The patrol's movement became even more deliberate as they navigated the last kilometer to their destination, each soldier acutely aware that they were entering the most dangerous phase of their mission. The observation post itself occupied a narrow ridge that provided excellent visibility across the Korengal Valley while offering multiple concealed positions for the patrol to establish their equipment. Elena immediately began identifying the best locations for her communication gear, looking for positions that would maximize signal strength while minimizing the visual signature that could betray their presence to enemy observers. As the Rangers established their positions, Elena couldn't shake the feeling that they were being watched. The sensation wasn't uncommon in Afghanistan, where the local population's loyalties were often unclear, and Taliban fighters could blend seamlessly into the civilian landscape. However, something about this morning felt different, as if the mountains themselves were holding their breath in anticipation of violence. Her equipment indicated strong signal strength with headquarters, and Elena established contact to confirm their arrival at the objective. The response from base was routine, but she noticed subtle tension in the radio operator's voice that suggested developments were occurring beyond what she could observe from her mountain perch. She made a mental note to monitor headquarters frequency more closely for any changes in operational tempo that might affect their mission. Sergeant Murphy had established his sniper position in a cluster of rocks that provided excellent concealment while offering clear fields of fire across multiple approaches to their location. His movements were economical and precise as he prepared his rifle and began the methodical process of ranging potential targets throughout the valley below. Elena watched him work with professional admiration, recognizing the dedication and skill required to achieve his level of marksmanship expertise. The morning progressed with routine observation activities as the patrol monitored the suspected supply route for any sign of Taliban movement. Elena maintained communication with headquarters while conducting her own surveillance of radio frequencies used by enemy forces. The electronic warfare aspect of modern combat was invisible to casual observers, but Elena understood that the radio spectrum was as much a battlefield as the physical terrain around them. By midday, the patrol had observed several civilian vehicles moving through the valley, but nothing that matched the profile of military supply convoys. The heat was becoming oppressive, and Elena could feel sweat accumulating beneath her body armor, despite the relatively cool mountain air. Afghanistan's climate was unforgiving, capable of producing hypothermia and heat stroke within the same 24-hour period depending on elevation and weather conditions. As afternoon approached, Elena began preparing for what she hoped would be an uneventful night of continued observation. Her communication schedule with headquarters called for regular check-ins every 4 hours, with emergency frequencies monitored continuously for any sign of trouble from other units or changes in the tactical situation. She had no way of knowing that within 6 hours, every skill she had ever learned would be tested in ways she had never imagined possible. The mountains around them seemed peaceful in the afternoon light, but Elena's instincts told her that appearances in Afghanistan were often deceiving. Something was building in the electronic chatter she monitored, a subtle increase in coded transmissions that suggested coordinated movement somewhere in the region. She made detailed notes of her observations, unaware that she was documenting the preliminary stages of an ambush that would transform her from a communications specialist into a legend. The electronic warfare landscape around Elena's position began shifting in ways that sent ice through her veins. What had started as routine background chatter on Taliban frequencies suddenly transformed into coordinated bursts of encrypted communication that followed patterns she recognized from intelligence briefings about large-scale operations. Her fingers moved across her monitoring equipment with practiced efficiency, documenting signal strengths, transmission intervals, and frequency changes that painted a picture no one wanted to see. Captain Rodriguez noticed her increased activity immediately. His years of experience had taught him to read the subtle signs that distinguished routine operations from developing crises, and Elena's body language screamed danger in a language that every combat veteran understood instinctively. He moved to her position with the careful deliberation of someone who knew that sudden movements in hostile territory could prove fatal. "What are you seeing, Pierce?" he asked quietly, his voice carrying just enough authority to cut through her concentration without startling her. Elena's response was delivered in the clinical tone the communication specialist used when reporting information that could determine whether their unit lived or died. "Sir, I'm tracking at least 15 distinct radio signatures operating on known Taliban frequencies. The transmission patterns suggest coordinated movement with multiple elements converging on this general area. Signal strength indicates they're getting closer, and the encryption protocols they're using match what intelligence has identified with their more sophisticated units." The implications hit Rodriguez like a physical blow. Sophisticated Taliban units didn't just stumble across American positions by accident. They were equipped, trained, and led by experienced fighters who understood how to plan and execute complex operations against better-equipped opponents. If Elena's assessment was accurate, his 12-man patrol wasn't just being observed, they were being hunted by a force that potentially outnumbered them and held the tactical advantage of knowing the terrain intimately. Rodriguez made the decision that would define everything that followed. Rather than immediately calling for extraction and revealing their position to any enemy forces monitoring American communications, he chose to maintain operational security while preparing his patrol for the possibility of contact. His experience told him that premature evacuation could be just as dangerous as staying too long, particularly if enemy forces were positioned to intercept fleeing American units. "Murphy," he called softly to his designated marksman, "I need you to expand your observation sector. Look for anything that doesn't belong. Reflections, movement, disturbances in the natural patterns. Pierce is tracking multiple enemy radio signatures, and I want to know if we can see what she's hearing." Sergeant Murphy's response was immediate and professional. His scope began methodically scanning sectors of the valley and surrounding ridgelines, looking for the subtle signs that revealed human presence in terrain that appeared natural and undisturbed. Years of combat experience had taught him to recognize the almost imperceptible differences between shadows cast by rocks and shadows cast by human beings, between the random movement of vegetation caused by wind and the purposeful disturbance created by someone trying to remain hidden. Elena continued monitoring the electronic environment while simultaneously preparing contingency communication plans. If the patrol came under attack, her ability to coordinate with headquarters and request immediate support would be crucial for their survival. She began pre-programming emergency frequencies and composing situation reports that could be transmitted quickly if circumstances deteriorated rapidly. The afternoon heat was becoming oppressive, but Elena noticed that the radio chatter she was monitoring had taken on a different quality. The transmissions were becoming more frequent and shorter in duration, suggesting that enemy forces were moving into final positions for whatever operation they were planning. Her equipment indicated that several of the radio signatures were now close enough to represent immediate threats to the patrol's security. Private Chen, positioned near the patrol's southern flank, was the first to spot actual visual confirmation of Elena's electronic intelligence. A brief reflection from an optical device, possibly binoculars or a rifle scope, flashed from a ridgeline approximately 800 meters from their position. The medic used hand signals to alert Captain Rodriguez while maintaining her own observation of the area where she had detected the reflection. Rodriguez felt the familiar weight of command responsibility settling across his shoulders like a lead blanket. The tactical situation was developing exactly as he had feared, with enemy forces apparently positioned to observe and potentially engage his patrol from multiple directions. His options were limited, and each carried significant risks that could determine whether his soldiers returned home alive or in flag-draped coffins. Elena's monitoring equipment suddenly detected a significant change in the enemy's communication patterns. The multiple radio signatures she had been tracking converged into a coordinated network operating on a single frequency with encryption protocols that suggested final operational coordination. Her blood ran cold as she recognized the pattern from intelligence briefings. This was exactly what Taliban communications looked like in the minutes before launching complex ambush operations. "Sir," she reported to Rodriguez with controlled urgency, "the radio traffic just shifted to a coordinated network. Based on intelligence patterns, this matches pre-attack communication protocols. I estimate we have less than 30 minutes before they initiate whatever they're planning." The captain's mind raced through tactical options while his eyes scanned the terrain around their position. Immediate extraction would require exposing the patrol to enemy observation and potential direct fire, while they moved through terrain that favored the defenders. Calling for artillery or air support would take time they might not have, and could endanger other American units operating in the region. Fighting from their current position offered good defensive terrain but left them isolated and potentially outnumbered by an unknown margin. Murphy's voice cut through Rodriguez's tactical calculations with information that made the decision for him. "Sir, I've got visual confirmation of at least 12 enemy fighters positioned on the northern ridgeline. They're armed with what appears to be PKM machine guns and RPG systems. Based on their positioning and the time they've had to prepare, I assess this is a coordinated ambush with multiple elements." Elena felt her training taking over as the situation transitioned from potential threat to imminent combat. She began transmitting situation reports to headquarters, while simultaneously monitoring for any change in enemy communications that might indicate the timing of their attack. Her radio equipment represented their lifeline to support assets, and she understood that her performance in the next few hours could determine whether the patrol survived or became another tragic statistic in Afghanistan's long history of military casualties. The Taliban fighters had chosen their ambush site with tactical sophistication that spoke to experienced leadership and careful planning. The patrol's observation post, which had seemed ideal for monitoring the valley below, was actually positioned in a natural kill zone where multiple ridgelines provided concealed firing positions while limiting escape routes. Elena realized with growing dread that they had walked into a trap that had probably been prepared for days or weeks. Rodriguez made the call that would define everything that followed. Rather than attempting immediate extraction through terrain that was almost certainly covered by enemy weapons, he decided to fight from their current position, while Elena coordinated with headquarters for immediate support. The decision carried enormous risks, but his experience told him that movement under these circumstances would be suicidal. "All positions, prepare for contact," he transmitted over their tactical radio network. "Elena, I need immediate communication with headquarters for fire support and extraction coordination. Murphy, identify priority targets and prepare to engage on my command. Everyone else, establish defensive positions and prepare for a coordinated enemy attack from multiple directions." Elena's hands moved across her communication equipment with practiced efficiency as she established contact with headquarters and began transmitting detailed situation reports. The response from base was immediate and professional, but she could hear the controlled urgency in the radio operator's voice that indicated her report was being escalated to senior leadership levels. Support assets were being mobilized, but Elena knew that help was at least an hour away under the best circumstances. The mountains around them had taken on an ominous quality as shadows lengthened, and the tactical situation continued to develop. Elena monitored enemy communications while coordinating with headquarters, unaware that she was about to face the greatest test of her military career and discover capabilities within herself that would surprise everyone who thought they knew her limitations. The attack erupted with the sudden violence of a thunderstorm, transforming the peaceful Afghan mountainside into a maelstrom of automatic weapons fire. explosions and screaming metal. The Taliban fighters had positioned themselves with tactical precision that spoke to months of planning and intimate knowledge of the terrain, turning what had appeared to be a routine observation mission into a carefully orchestrated killing field. The first shots came from the northern ridgeline, where Murphy had spotted the enemy fighters. PKM machine gun fire raked across the Rangers' position with devastating accuracy, sending chunks of rock and metal fragments spinning through the air like deadly confetti. The distinctive sound of Kalashnikov rifles joined the cacophony as Taliban fighters opened fire from at least 4 different positions, creating overlapping fields of fire that made movement almost impossible. Elena felt the world slow down around her as combat adrenaline flooded her system. Bullets snapped overhead with the distinctive crack that indicated they were passing within inches of her head, while the heavier thump of machine gun rounds impacting nearby rocks sent shockwaves through her body. Her training took over completely, and she found herself operating her radio equipment with mechanical precision while her conscious mind struggled to process the intensity of the attack. "Base, this is Viper 6, she transmitted, with remarkable calm considering that death was missing her by mere inches. "We are under heavy attack from multiple positions. Estimated 15 to 20 enemy fighters with crew-served weapons. Immediate close air support and medevac on standby required. Our position is grid reference 41 SPR 123456780. The response from headquarters was immediate but carried the controlled urgency that indicated Elena's patrol was not the only unit in contact. "Viper 6, this is base. Understand you are under attack. Closest air support is 30 minutes out. Medevac is spinning up now. Can you maintain your position?" Elena's answer was interrupted by an RPG explosion that detonated against the rocks 15 meters from her location. The blast wave knocked her sideways and filled her mouth with dust and debris, while shrapnel whistled overhead in a deadly symphony. She recovered quickly, her years of training overriding the shock and disorientation that could prove fatal in combat situations. "Base, maintaining position but taking heavy casualties," she reported, though at that moment no Rangers had been seriously wounded. Elena understood that in combat communications, it was better to overstate the severity of the situation and receive unnecessary support than to understate it and die waiting for help that came too late. Captain Rodriguez was orchestrating the patrol's defense with the controlled aggression that had kept him alive through 4 deployments. His voice carried clearly over the chaos as he directed individual Rangers to specific defensive positions and coordinated their return fire to maximum effect. Years of combat experience had taught him that surviving complex ambushes required disciplined fire control and tactical patience rather than the wild shooting that got soldiers killed. "Murphy, I need suppressive fire on the northern ridgeline," Rodriguez commanded. "Wilson, prepare demolitions for the eastern approach. Chen, establish a casualty collection point behind the large boulder cluster. Everyone else, maintain fire discipline and make every shot count." Sergeant Murphy's rifle spoke with methodical precision as he engaged Taliban fighters who exposed themselves while maneuvering for better firing positions. His M110 semi-automatic sniper system was designed for exactly this type of engagement, and his years of experience showed in the controlled rhythm of his shooting. Each shot was carefully aimed and deliberately fired, turning the Taliban's tactical advantage into a liability as they discovered that movement in his field of view carried deadly consequences. Elena continued coordinating with headquarters while monitoring Taliban radio communications, a dual responsibility that required extraordinary concentration under conditions that would have overwhelmed most soldiers. The enemy's radio chatter revealed that they had indeed planned this ambush for several days, positioning fighters to cover all possible escape routes while concentrating enough firepower to overwhelm a patrol of Rangers through sheer volume of fire. "Sir," Elena called to Rodriguez during a brief lull in the incoming fire, "Taliban communications indicate they have blocking positions on our planned extraction routes. They're coordinating to prevent us from breaking contact and escaping through the valleys." Rodriguez felt the tactical situation crystallizing around him with deadly clarity. The enemy had not only positioned themselves to destroy his patrol, but had also anticipated his likely responses and prepared countermeasures accordingly. This level of tactical sophistication suggested that his unit was facing Taliban fighters led by someone with formal military training and extensive combat experience. The firefight intensified as Taliban fighters began coordinated assaults on the Rangers' position from multiple directions simultaneously. Elena watched through her scope as enemy fighters moved with tactical discipline that rivaled American military units, using covering fire and movement techniques that maximized their effectiveness while minimizing their exposure to defensive fire. Private Chen's voice cut through the chaos with the controlled urgency that medics used when reporting casualties. "We've got wounded," she called out. Private Jackson took shrapnel to the leg and Corporal Williams had a head wound. Both are stable but need evacuation. Elena felt the weight of responsibility settling on her shoulders like a lead blanket. Her radio represented the patrol's only connection to support assets that could save their lives, but the Taliban's tactical sophistication suggested they understood American communication procedures and might be attempting to jam or intercept their transmissions. "Base, this is Viper 6, Elena transmitted. "We have 2 urgent casualties requiring immediate medevac. Enemy forces are using sophisticated tactics and appear to have blocking positions on our extraction routes. Request immediate close air support and armed reconnaissance of surrounding terrain." The response from headquarters carried news that made Elena's blood run cold. "Viper 6, be advised that 2 other patrols in your area of operations are also under attack. Air support is being prioritized based on casualty reports and tactical situations. Maintain your position and continue to provide updates." Elena realized with growing dread that her patrol was part of a larger Taliban operation targeting multiple American units simultaneously. The sophisticated coordination she had detected in their radio communications was apparently part of a region-wide offensive designed to inflict maximum casualties on American forces while they were dispersed across multiple patrol areas. Murphy's ammunition supply was becoming a critical concern as the firefight stretched beyond what anyone had anticipated. His precision shooting had eliminated several Taliban fighters, but the enemy seemed to have unlimited replacements moving into positions as quickly as he could eliminate the original occupants. The tactical mathematics were working against the Rangers, and Elena understood that their situation would become untenable unless something changed dramatically. "Sir," Murphy called to Rodriguez during a pause in the enemy fire, "I'm down to my last 20 rounds of match-grade ammunition. After that, I'll have to switch to standard ball ammunition, which will significantly reduce my effective range and accuracy." Rodriguez felt the weight of command bearing down on him as the tactical situation continued to deteriorate. His patrol was facing a numerically superior enemy force that had prepared their ambush with professional competence, while American support assets were committed to other engagements and might not arrive in time to prevent a catastrophe. Elena monitored the radio frequencies while engaging individual Taliban fighters with her M4 carbine, a combination of responsibilities that pushed her training and capabilities to their absolute limits. She had never imagined that her role as a communications specialist would require her to function simultaneously as a combat infantryman, but Afghanistan had a way of forcing soldiers to exceed their presumed limitations. The Taliban fighters launched another coordinated assault, this time concentrating their attack on the southern approach where Private Chen was treating the wounded Rangers. Elena watched in horror as enemy fighters moved with tactical precision toward positions that would allow them to overrun the casualty collection point and eliminate the most vulnerable members of her patrol. It was at that moment, with Taliban fighters closing on their wounded comrades and ammunition supplies running critically low, that Elena spotted something that would change everything. Among the equipment scattered around a Taliban fighting position that Murphy had silenced with precise rifle fire, she could clearly see the distinctive profile of a .338 Lapua Magnum sniper rifle, apparently abandoned by its operator when Murphy's return fire had made the position untenable. Elena stared at the weapon for several seconds, her mind processing tactical possibilities that seemed simultaneously obvious and impossible. Bakase 338 Lapua was a precision rifle system designed for extreme long-range engagements, capable of accurate fire at distances that exceeded anything in the Rangers' current arsenal. In the hands of a skilled marksman, it could reach Taliban positions that were currently immune to return fire and turn the tactical balance of the entire engagement. The only problem was that reaching the weapon would require crossing approximately 50 meters of open ground under direct enemy observation and fire. It would be the kind of movement that got soldiers killed, unless someone possessed both the skill to make the crossing successfully and the marksmanship ability to make the risk worthwhile. Elena Pierce stared at that rifle and felt her father's words echoing in her memory. Sometimes life puts you in situations where all your different skills come together in ways you never expected. She was about to discover exactly what he meant. Elena Pierce found herself caught between two impossibilities, staring at the abandoned .338 Lapua while Taliban fighters advanced toward her wounded comrades with methodical precision. Every instinct screamed that attempting to reach the rifle would be suicide, but her tactical assessment told her it might be their only chance of preventing a complete massacre. The mathematics of the situation were brutally simple. Without that weapon's long-range capability, the Taliban's superior numbers and positioning would eventually overwhelm their defensive position. Captain Rodriguez noticed Elena's intense focus on something beyond their perimeter and followed her gaze to the abandoned sniper rifle. His combat experience immediately recognized both the tactical opportunity and the suicidal nature of any attempt to reach it. The weapon represented a potential game-changer, but the 50 meters of open ground between their position and the rifle might as well have been 50 miles, given the enemy's overlapping fields of fire. "Pierce, whatever you're thinking, forget it," Rodriguez commanded, reading her intentions with the clarity that came from years of leading soldiers in combat. "That rifle isn't worth your life, and we need you on the radio coordinating our extraction." Elena's response surprised everyone within hearing distance, delivered with a calm certainty that seemed completely at odds with the chaos erupting around them. "Sir, with respect, I can make that shot. The Taliban fighters advancing on Chen's position are beyond the effective range of our current weapons, but they're well within range of a .338 Lapua. If I can reach that rifle, I can stop their advance and potentially break up their entire attack formation." Murphy overheard the conversation and turned from his scope long enough to study Elena with professional interest. He had worked with her on multiple missions and knew she was competent with standard infantry weapons, but the kind of precision shooting required to make a difference with a captured enemy rifle was something entirely different. The .338 Lapua was a specialist's weapon that required extensive training and experience to use effectively under ideal conditions, let alone in the middle of a firefight. "Pierce, no disrespect, but do you have any idea what you're talking about?" Murphy asked, his voice carrying the skepticism of someone who understood exactly how difficult precision shooting could be. "That's not just a bigger rifle. It's a completely different weapon system with its own ballistics, scope adjustments, and handling characteristics. Even if you could reach it without getting killed, you'd need time to familiarize yourself with the equipment before you could make accurate shots." Elena's answer revealed a background that none of her fellow Rangers had fully understood or appreciated. "Sergeant, I've been shooting .338 Lapua systems since I was 16. My father owns 3 different rifles in that caliber, and I've competed in long-range precision competitions across Montana, Wyoming, and Colorado. Before I enlisted, I held the Montana state record for longest confirmed kill on an elk at 1,247 yards. The revelation hit Rodriguez like a physical blow as he suddenly understood that his communications specialist possessed capabilities that went far beyond anything reflected in her military occupational specialty. Elena Pierce wasn't just a radio operator who happened to be competent with infantry weapons. She was apparently a precision marksman whose skills rivaled or exceeded those of formally trained military snipers. "Sir," Elena continued, her voice maintaining that same calm certainty despite the bullets snapping overhead, "I know this sounds insane, but I can make this work. The Taliban fighters don't know I'm a marksman, so they won't be expecting precision fire from that position. If I can reach the rifle and get oriented on their positions, I can probably eliminate their key leaders and break up their coordinated attack." Murphy was processing the tactical implications of Elena's proposal with the rapid mental calculations that distinguished effective snipers from merely adequate shooters. If she truly possessed the marksmanship skills she claimed, and if the captured rifle was properly zeroed and functional, she could potentially engage Taliban fighters at ranges where they couldn't effectively return fire. The tactical advantage could be decisive, but only if she survived the movement to reach the weapon. "What about the approach?" Murphy asked, his skepticism giving way to professional interest. "Even if you can shoot, you still have to cross 50 meters of open ground, while Taliban fighters are actively looking for targets. That's not a marksmanship problem. That's a suicide mission." Elena had been studying the terrain and enemy positions while they talked, using the same analytical skills that made her effective at reading topographical maps and predicting communication dead zones. Her assessment was based on careful observation rather than wishful thinking, and she believed she had identified a route that might barely be survivable. "The Taliban positions are concentrated on the northern and eastern ridgelines," she explained, pointing out specific locations where muzzle flashes had revealed enemy fighting positions. There's a depression that runs from our location toward the rifle that would provide concealment from the northern positions, and the eastern fighters are focused on Murphy's position and the casualty collection point. If I move during their next coordinated assault, when their attention is focused on suppressing our defensive fire, I might be able to reach the rifle before they realize what's happening. Rodriguez felt the weight of command bearing down on him as he realized that Elena's proposal might represent their best chance of survival. His tactical training told him that allowing a communications specialist to attempt such a dangerous movement was a violation of every principle of sound military leadership. But his combat experience told him that desperate situations sometimes required desperate measures. Even if you reach the rifle, how do you know it's functional? Rodriguez asked, searching for rational objections to a plan that seemed to offer equal chances of salvation and disaster. Taliban fighters aren't known for maintaining their weapons to American standards, and a precision rifle with improper maintenance or damaged optics is worse than useless. Elena's response revealed the depth of her technical knowledge about precision shooting systems. Sir, I can assess the rifle's condition and functionality within 60 seconds of reaching it. If the bore is clear, the scope is properly mounted, and the bolt action functions smoothly, I can determine the rifle's zero by observing impact points on known distance targets. The Taliban have been using that position to engage our troops, so I know the rifle was functional at least 30 minutes ago. Private Chen's voice cut through their tactical discussion with information that made the decision for them. Sir, the wounded are getting worse. Jackson's bleeding internally, and Williams is showing signs of traumatic brain injury. If we don't get them evacuated within the next hour, I'm going to lose them both. Elena stared at the abandoned rifle one more time, then looked at her wounded comrades and felt something crystallize in her mind with absolute clarity. She had spent her entire military career supporting other soldiers and enabling their success through her technical expertise, but now her brothers in arms needed something that only she could provide. The mathematical precision that made her effective with radio frequencies and communication protocols was exactly the same mental discipline required for long-range precision shooting. Sir, I'm making the movement, Elena announced, beginning to shed unnecessary equipment that would slow her down or make noise during the approach. Murphy, I need you to provide covering fire when I signal. Everyone else, be ready to exploit whatever advantage I can create. Rodriguez realized that he was about to make one of the most consequential decisions of his military career. Elena Pierce represented his patrol's lifeline to the outside world, and losing her would leave them isolated and unable to coordinate their extraction. But keeping her in her current position while Taliban fighters overran their wounded comrades would accomplish nothing except ensuring that they all died together. Pierce, Rodriguez said finally, his voice carrying the finality of a commander who had accepted responsibility for an impossible decision, if you're gonna do this, do it right. One shot, one kill, and keep shooting until they stop moving or you run out of ammunition. We'll cover your movement and provide suppressive fire once you're in position. Elena nodded once, checked her weapon and equipment one final time, and prepared to sprint across 50 meters of death toward a rifle that might save their lives or prove to be the last mistake she ever made. Elena Pierce crouched at the edge of their defensive position, every muscle in her body coiled like a compressed spring, as she waited for the perfect moment to begin what would either be the most heroic or most foolish action of her military career. The Taliban fighters were preparing for another coordinated assault, their radio chatter indicating they planned to overrun the casualty collection point within the next 10 minutes. Time was running out with brutal mathematical precision. Murphy positioned himself to provide covering fire, his remaining ammunition carefully rationed for maximum effect during Elena's movement. His professional assessment of her chances remained grim, but combat had taught him that impossible odds sometimes yielded to extraordinary determination and precise execution. He had seen soldiers accomplish miraculous feats when their brothers' lives hung in the balance. Pierce, when I start shooting, you move fast and low, Murphy instructed, his voice carrying the calm authority of someone who had guided countless soldiers through life-and-death situations. Don't look back, don't hesitate, and don't stop moving until you reach that rifle. Once you're there, take 30 seconds to assess the weapon, then start shooting. Priority targets are anyone with crew-served weapons or radio equipment. Elena nodded, her breathing controlled and steady, despite the adrenaline coursing through her system. Years of competitive shooting had taught her to manage stress and maintain focus under pressure, skills that translated directly to combat situations, even though she had never imagined applying them in such extreme circumstances. Her mind was crystal clear, processing tactical information with the same precision she applied to radio frequency management. The moment arrived with the sudden violence that characterized Taliban assault tactics. Enemy fighters began their coordinated attack with suppressive fire from multiple positions, filling the air with bullets and explosions designed to pin down the Rangers, while assault teams moved to overrun their defensive positions. The noise was overwhelming, but Elena's focus narrowed to a tunnel vision that excluded everything except the terrain between her current position and the abandoned rifle. "Go, go, go!" Murphy shouted, his rifle beginning the methodical rhythm that would provide covering fire for Elena's movement. Elena exploded from her concealed position like a sprinter leaving the starting blocks, her body low and moving with the fluid efficiency that came from years of physical training and natural athleticism. The first 20 meters took her through a shallow depression that provided partial concealment from Taliban observation posts, but she could hear bullets snapping overhead as enemy fighters detected her movement and began engaging her with increasing accuracy. Her radio pack had been left behind to reduce weight and noise, severing her connection to headquarters and leaving the patrol temporarily isolated from outside support. The decision represented a calculated risk that highlighted the desperation of their tactical situation. Elena's communications expertise was being sacrificed for the possibility that her marksmanship skills could save them all. Taliban fighters on the eastern ridgeline began concentrating their fire on Elena's movement route as they realized that someone was attempting to reach the abandoned sniper position. Their shooting was disciplined and accurate, forcing Elena to sprint in unpredictable patterns that made her a more difficult target while simultaneously slowing her progress toward the rifle. Bullets impacted the rocks around her with metallic spangs and whining ricochets that sent fragments spinning in every direction. Elena felt something tug at her sleeve as a round passed close enough to tear fabric, but her momentum carried her forward without pause. The competitive shooting that had dominated her teenage years had never prepared her for running while being shot at, but her athletic conditioning and mental toughness proved adequate for the challenge. Murphy's covering fire was reaching Taliban positions with devastating precision, forcing enemy fighters to take cover and disrupting their ability to maintain sustained fire on Elena's position. His ammunition was critically low, but every round was finding its target with the methodical accuracy that had made him one of the most effective designated marksmen in the Ranger Battalion. Elena reached the halfway point of her movement just as a Taliban fighter emerged from concealment to engage her with a PKM machine gun. The heavy weapon's distinctive sound filled the air as bullets traced past her position, some so close that she could feel the supersonic shockwaves. Her evasive movement became even more erratic as she zigzagged between rocks and depressions that provided momentary protection from direct fire. The final 25 meters required crossing completely open ground with no concealment except speed and unpredictability. Elena could see the abandoned rifle clearly now, lying beside the body of a Taliban fighter that Murphy had eliminated earlier in the engagement. The weapon appeared intact, with its scope still mounted and the bolt action closed, suggesting that it had been abandoned hurriedly rather than deliberately damaged. Taliban fighters realized what Elena was attempting and began concentrating overwhelming firepower on the sniper position to prevent her from reaching the weapon. Their tactical understanding was sophisticated enough to recognize that allowing an American marksman to gain control of a precision rifle system would fundamentally alter the balance of the engagement in ways that could prove decisive. Elena's final sprint covered the remaining distance in a series of bounds that took her from rock to rock while bullets sparked off the stone surfaces around her. Her body armor absorbed the impact of several small fragments, but nothing that would prevent her from continuing the movement. The mathematical precision that made her effective with radio frequencies was now being applied to calculating angles, distances, and timing with life or death consequences. She reached the rifle position just as a Taliban fighter appeared on a nearby ridge with an RPG system, clearly intending to eliminate both Elena and the sniper position with a single well-placed rocket. Elena dove behind the largest available rock just as the rocket-propelled grenade detonated against the hillside, filling the air with smoke, dust, and deadly fragments that rattled off her protective cover like metallic hail. The explosion left Elena temporarily deafened and disoriented, but her training took over as she reached for the abandoned rifle. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency as she conducted a rapid assessment of the weapon's condition, checking the bore for obstructions, testing the bolt action's smoothness, and examining the scope for damage or loose mounting. Years of experience with precision rifles, allowed her to complete the assessment in less than 30 seconds. The .338 Lapua was a precision instrument that had been maintained to surprisingly high standards. The scope was properly mounted and appeared to be zeroed for the distances she would need to engage Taliban positions. The bolt action cycled smoothly, and the magazine contained 4 rounds of match-grade ammunition that would be adequate for eliminating key targets if her shooting was precise enough. Elena settled into a shooting position behind the rocks, her body automatically assuming the stable platform that years of competitive shooting had made second nature. The rifle felt familiar in her hands despite being an enemy weapon, its weight and balance similar to the precision rifles she had used in civilian competition. Her breathing slowed and controlled as she prepared to engage targets that could determine whether her patrol lived or died. Through the scope, she could see Taliban fighters moving with tactical discipline toward positions that would allow them to overrun the casualty collection point where Private Chen was treating the wounded Rangers. The enemy's coordination and professionalism were evident in their movement techniques, but their focus on the assault had made them less cautious about exposure to long-range precision fire. Elena identified her first target, a Taliban fighter carrying a radio who appeared to be coordinating the assault on her comrade's position. Eliminating him would disrupt their communications and potentially cause enough confusion to break up their coordinated attack. Her crosshairs settled on center mass as she controlled her breathing and prepared to fire the shot that would announce her presence to every Taliban fighter in the valley. The moment of truth had arrived. Elena Pierce, communications specialist turned sniper, was about to discover whether her childhood marksmanship training and adult determination would be enough to save the lives of 11 Rangers, who were counting on her to perform a miracle with an enemy weapon under impossible circumstances. Elena Pierce settled behind the captured .338 Lapua with the calm precision of someone who had spent thousands of hours perfecting the art of long-range marksmanship. The chaos of battle seemed to fade into background noise as her mind entered the focused state that competitive shooters called the zone, a place where breathing, heartbeat, and muscle tension all synchronized to create the perfect platform for precision shooting. Her first target remained the Taliban radio operator who was coordinating the assault on her wounded comrades. Through the scope, she could see him clearly at 650 meters, speaking into his radio while gesturing toward the Rangers' defensive positions. He was positioned behind rocks that provided protection from the patrol's return fire, but his location was completely exposed to Elena's elevated shooting position. Elena's breathing slowed to the controlled rhythm that her father had taught her during those long afternoons on the Montana ranch. "Breathe in, breathe out, hold, squeeze," she whispered, the mantra as familiar as her own heartbeat. The crosshairs settled on the radio operator's center mass, and Elena felt that moment of perfect stillness that preceded every successful shot. The .338 Lapua spoke with authority that echoed across the valley like thunder. The massive round covered the 650 meters in less than a second, striking the Taliban radio operator's center mass and eliminating him instantly. Elena worked the bolt with practiced efficiency, ejecting the spent casing and chambering a fresh round while searching for her next target. The Taliban fighters reacted to the unexpected precision fire with confusion and alarm. Their radio chatter became frantic as they realized that someone was engaging them with a high-powered rifle from an unexpected position. Several fighters began maneuvering toward Elena's location, but their movement exposed them to observation and engagement from her elevated position. Elena's second shot eliminated a Taliban fighter who was attempting to reposition a PKM machine gun to target the casualty collection point. The 750-meter engagement required precise holdover calculations that she performed instinctively, based on years of experience with similar ballistic trajectories. The heavy .338 round eliminated the threat immediately, leaving the machine gun unmanned and ineffective. Murphy's voice carried across the battlefield as he observed Elena's shooting with professional admiration that bordered on disbelief. "Holy shit, Pierce! Where did you learn to shoot like that? You just eliminated 2 priority targets with consecutive shots at extended range." Elena was already acquiring her third target, a Taliban leader who was attempting to rally his fighters for a final assault on the Rangers' position. Her shooting had disrupted their coordination and created confusion, but experienced fighters could adapt quickly to changing circumstances. She needed to maintain pressure while she still held the advantage of surprise and superior positioning. The third shot covered 580 meters, and eliminated the Taliban leader just as he was organizing a flanking movement that could have overrun Murphy's position. Elena's marksmanship was having a psychological impact that went beyond the tactical value of eliminating individual fighters. The Taliban forces were beginning to realize that they were facing a precision marksman whose capabilities exceeded anything they had encountered in the region. Captain Rodriguez coordinated the patrol's actions to exploit the advantage that Elena was creating with her long-range shooting. All positions maintain suppressive fire on remaining Taliban positions. Pierce is disrupting their coordination, and we need to prevent them from regrouping. Elena identified her fourth target, a Taliban fighter who was attempting to use an RPG system to eliminate her shooting position. The mathematics of the engagement were challenging. The target was moving laterally at 720 meters, while seeking cover behind terrain features that partially obscured him. Elena led the target's movement and fired, just as he exposed himself to aim the rocket-propelled grenade. The shot eliminated the RPG threat and marked the point where Taliban morale began to crack visibly. Elena could observe through her scope as enemy fighters began abandoning their positions and attempting to withdraw from the engagement. Their disciplined tactical movement deteriorated into something approaching panic as they realized that their carefully planned ambush had been reversed by a single American marksman. Elena's fifth and sixth shots eliminated Taliban fighters who were attempting to provide covering fire for their retreating comrades. Both engagements were beyond 800 meters and required precise compensation for wind drift and bullet drop, calculations that Elena performed with the unconscious competence that came from years of competitive long-range shooting. Private Chen's voice carried across the battlefield with information that transformed Elena's tactical shooting into a race against time. "Sir, Jackson's vital signs are deteriorating rapidly. I need to perform emergency surgery, but I can't work while we're still under fire." Elena acquired her seventh target with grim determination, knowing that every second counted for the wounded ranger's survival. A Taliban fighter was attempting to maintain suppressive fire from a position that kept Chen pinned down and unable to treat her patient effectively. The 950-meter shot required Elena to compensate for significant bullet drop and wind drift, but the target was stationary and clearly visible through her scope. The seventh shot eliminated the final Taliban fighter who posed an immediate threat to the patrol's security. Elena worked the bolt and acquired her eighth target, a fighter who was attempting to coordinate the enemy withdrawal while harassing fire on the ranger's position. This final engagement would be the most challenging, requiring a shot at maximum effective range under field conditions. At 1,100 meters, the target was barely visible through Elena's scope, appearing as a small figure moving between rocks and terrain features. The ballistic calculations required for accurate fire at such distance pushed both the rifle and Elena's marksmanship skills to their absolute limits. She compensated for wind drift, bullet drop, and the target's movement while controlling her breathing and maintaining the stable shooting platform that precision marksmanship demanded. Elena's eighth and final shot eliminated the last Taliban fighter who posed a threat to her patrol's security. The engagement at 1,100 meters represented shooting at the extreme edge of both the rifle's capability and her own marksmanship skills, but years of training and natural ability combined to produce the accurate fire that completed the tactical reversal of the entire engagement. The silence that followed Elena's final shot was deafening after hours of intense combat. Taliban radio communications ceased entirely as the surviving enemy fighters retreated beyond effective engagement range, leaving behind 8 dead comrades and a failed ambush that had cost them their tactical initiative and psychological dominance. Elena remained in her shooting position for several minutes, scanning the terrain through her scope for any sign of continued enemy activity. Her marksmanship had eliminated 8 Taliban fighters, with 8 consecutive shots at ranges between 580 and 1,100 meters, using an enemy weapon under combat conditions that would have challenged the most experienced military snipers. Captain Rodriguez's voice carried across the battlefield with the controlled relief of a commander who had just witnessed his patrol's salvation. All positions maintain security while Chen treats the wounded. Pierce, that was the most extraordinary shooting I've ever witnessed. You just saved 11 lives with 8 shots. Elena felt the adrenaline beginning to fade as the immediate tactical crisis passed, replaced by the exhaustion that always followed intense combat. She had accomplished something that would be talked about in Ranger battalions for generations, using an enemy weapon to eliminate 8 Taliban fighters and reverse a carefully planned ambush that should have resulted in the destruction of her patrol. Private Chen was able to perform emergency surgery on Jackson without fear of enemy interference, stabilizing his condition until medevac helicopters could extract the wounded Rangers to advanced medical facilities. Williams recovered from his head injury and returned to full duty within 6 weeks, while Jackson required extensive surgery but eventually made a complete recovery. Elena Pierce returned to her communications duties, but her extraordinary marksmanship had earned her a place in military legend. She was awarded the Silver Star for gallantry in action and became the first woman to receive formal sniper training in her unit. Her 8 consecutive hits at extended range with a captured enemy weapon became a case study taught in military academies and sniper schools around the world. Years later, when asked about that day in the Afghan mountains, Elena would always emphasize that her actions were motivated by a simple principle: never abandon your brothers in arms when you possess the skills to save their lives. The Taliban had believed they were hunting a communications specialist, but they discovered too late that they were facing a marksman whose determination and skill exceeded their ability to comprehend or counter. Elena Pierce had proven that sometimes one person with the right skills, perfect timing, and unwavering courage could change the outcome of an entire battle, with nothing more than 8 well-placed shots. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.